Hi, everybody. It's Carrie Donegan. Welcome to the Win Win Women Network. And I am so glad that you are here. We're going to start our show in just 1 minute. Settle in, get yourself a cup of tea, relax, and let's have a good time together. We're in the book Eat to Beat Your Diet. I'm so excited to keep reading along with you. All right, let's bring in our Win Win Women audience. They are here now. Welcome to our Win Win Women audience. I'm Carrie Donegan. So glad you're here today. Looks like we're having a little bit of a transmission delay. Hopefully, the recording is going to go off smoothly. We're hoping for that. All right, so we're on page 16 of this great book, Eat to Beat Your Diet. If you don't have it, don't worry. We're going to go through it very slowly over the next probably year or so, believe it or not, almost anyway, to really dig deep into the information in this book. And I think it's really important, or I wouldn't be bringing this information to you. So we're talking about the immune system. For those of you who are jumping in a little bit late, we've already done 2 episodes on this. Go back to Win Win Women Network, find the show, and go ahead and review those episodes. Or you can go to my channel, Carrie Lou Donegan, and look at the information there from past episodes as well. So either way, whatever works best for you. But the immune system, let's talk about the immune system. By far, the most familiar of your body's 5 defense system is your immune system. And I think a lot of people don't actually know what that is. We talk a lot about vaccines. We talk a lot about antibiotics in this world. And so I want you to just consider one thing before we move ahead in this book. And that is your body a perfect machine or not? What does it need to run? And also, what does it need to defend itself? What does it need to fix itself? And do we see immunity anywhere else in nature and in the world? So, for example, when you look at wildlife, do animals get sick? And we know that they do. So, how did they survive without medical intervention? Right? Let's consider that for a moment. So medicine is only about 150 years old, and in its extensive use, I would say it's only about since the 1970s that people really jumped in and grasped, medicine in a really profound way. So, how did we survive as a species until now without medical intervention? I don't know about you, but when I drive down the street, when I look through the town that I live in, all I see is construction around medical facilities. It really is a booming industry. It has become big business. And so sometimes we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to negotiate, navigate what's going on, and make sure we understand the purpose of what we're doing. Another statistic that I read recently was that patients or doctors assume that when you go into the doctor's office that you want to walk out with a prescription. And so often medicine is prescribed when other things could have been prescribed instead. Did you know that medicine is not described as a pharmaceutical? Medicine is described as something that actually promotes wellness and helps you overcome disease. Did you know that your doctor can actually prescribe for you food and exercise as part of their recommendation to help with your recovery or your overall wellness program? I did not know that. And so it's exciting for us to be able to advocate for ourselves and to listen to physicians and see exactly what diet does and what we can do. So next time you go to your doctor, maybe it's time for you to ask them to prescribe a good diet for you. And if they're not familiar with what those foods are, you can actually do a little bit of education in reverse. Perhaps you could share this book with your own physician. I think sometimes we need to grow together in this world, and it's not our physicians' fault that their medical schools are funded by pharmaceutical companies and that they don't spend a lot of time learning about food and wellness. And so I think as patients, if we want the world to look a little bit different, which means for me that the world becomes healthier, better weight, better energy, better performance, better function, then we need a two-way education highway between conversation between patients and physicians. So let's talk about what your immune system actually is. Did you know that 70% of your immune system is in your intestines? I don't know about you, but I guess that's not where I thought it was. I don't know where I thought it was. It's interesting when we get a vaccine, where do we get it? We don't get it in our intestine. We get we get a shot in the arm, right? So a vaccine goes into your bloodstream, which is a closed system. It's never meant to be accessed by the outside world. Immunity is in and of itself something that actually has to be accessed by the outside world. So let's think about it. What does your body do to interact with the outside world? Number one, you have skin. Skin is your largest organ. It definitely comes into contact with the outside world, and it is a significant part of your immune system. Not the biggest. The biggest is in your intestines. So let's talk about your digestive system. Your digestive system is also part of your immune system. In fact, it is 70% of your immune system. And how does that reach the outside world? By what we ingest. Okay, so I think that's really important to think that if the food that you're eating is entering a system that is 70% of your immunity, and staying healthy is important, then whatever you're putting into that 70%, whatever you're putting into your gut is going to determine how strong an immune system you are. And of course, the third one that maybe is obvious, maybe not, is your respiratory system. We breathe in and out, right? All of the things, good and bad, every day. And our lungs and a respiratory system have to do its work to protect us. So again, let's go over this again. I'm going to read this to you. This is the bottom page 16. 70% of your immune system is your intestines, where it communicates with your gut microbiome. Remember, we talked a lot about the microbiome in other Radical Age Reversal episodes, but we're also talking about it very, very concretely here in this book, Eat to Beat Your Diet. Part of your immune system is also embedded in your fat. That's amazing. Okay, so remember, we're learning that fat is not a bad thing. Excess fat can be a bad thing. Having the wrong type of fat can be a bad thing, but fat in and of itself plays a positive role. And now we know that fat is part of your immune system. Like the rest of your body's defenses, your immune system is strongly influenced by the foods you eat. Your immune system has two main parts, the innate system and the adaptive system. Innate immunity is swift acting and reacts the same way each time, like a blunt instrument. This part of your immune system causes inflammation, a necessary and brief response. So not chronic inflammation. We're talking about just that response from the immune system when defending your body against invaders. The second part, the adaptive immunity, is smarter but slower acting. It's trained to recognize enemies and then develop sophisticated responses to handle each threat. This is where T cells and natural killer cells, also known as large granular lymphocytes, work together to tackle invaders. Okay, I'm going to go over that once more because this might be unfamiliar to you. I know it was unfamiliar to me. So we have innate immunity and we have adaptive immunity. All right. So the innate immunity is the one that just knows what to do, right? The adaptive immunity is the one that has to think about it. What do I have to do, right? It's sort of the smart side of the immune system. And what it does is it produces T cells and natural killer cells, also known as large granular lymphocytes. Okay, so you don't have to memorize all that, but now when you hear those words, you're going to say, oh, that has to do with the immune system. Maybe you'll even remember it has to do with the adaptive immune system. Maybe that's why doTERRA calls their anti-stress formula adaptive. Something to keep in mind. Adaptive immunity is activated inside your body in response to viral infections, a vaccine injection, beasting, or when your immune system is trained by cancer treatments known as immunotherapy to seek out and destroy cancer cells. Together, the elements of these two parts of the immune system functions like an army of super soldiers, each with its own special weapons, tactics for detecting, destroying, and clearing out invaders from the fortress of your body. All right. So we have the means to defend ourselves if we're given the right stimulus. So let's talk about your immune system function the way you would turn the volume up and down on a car radio. I think that kind of helps. It's a good analogy, and it's something that he talks a lot about in the book. If the volume's too low, you won't get the right output, and that's immune deficiency. If the volume is too high, you're going to get an overreaction, which is where we get things like allergies and autoimmune diseases. Okay. So the response by the immune system has to be regulated. And if your immune system is not being regulated or it's being interfered with, you're going to end up with one of these two dysfunctions. Okay. So one is an under response, right? So it's not performing. And then one is an over response where it's overacting. And again, the under response is considered immune deficiency, and an over response is considered like an autoimmunity. All right. So if inflammation persists, for example, that would be an over response. You can end up with a chronic inflammatory situation. Cancer, heart disease, dementia, diabetes, autoimmune conditions, and obesity are a few diseases that are tied to the smoldering fire of chronic inflammation. As you will see later, chronic inflammation is caused by excessive body fat. Okay. So there's a tie. We know that fat is good and it has a role to play in the immune system. Too much fat can cause an over response in the immune system. An over response in the immune system is considered a chronic disease, and chronic diseases can do continuing damage to your body over time. So you want to reverse that as soon as possible. All right, so let's go back in and talk a little bit more about fat tissues. So normal fat tissues contain immune cells that are a critical part of your response against disease. About 5% of all cells in your fat are immune cells, and they're called macrophages. It helps to maintain adequate blood supply to your fat, and they also are tasked to remove dead fat cells. Okay, so these are kind of like the construction workers in your fat cells. They're called phages. And it's funny because I think for most of us, we think a fat cell is just like an empty balloon, and fat fills up inside of it, and then it blows up and you get bigger. And then when you go on a diet, you start using that fat, and then you start to shrink. But it's much more complex than that, much, much more. Okay, so this is an interesting study done by Columbia University where they did fat biopsies, and they said that obese as well as lean people compared their immune cells. They found that obese people, macrophages represented a whopping 40% of all the cells in the fat, 8 times that above normal level. The cells also were pumping out inflammatory cytokines, which are chemicals that provoke chronic inflammation. Another study by the Human Research Center on Nutrition in Paris found that an even greater 16-fold increase in the number of macrophages in the fat of morbidly obese individuals when compared to lean subjects. So does it surprise us that people who were obese ended up with being affected by COVID more than people who were lean? No, it makes total sense because they have this overabundance of these cells in their body, and it's working against them. All right, too much of a good thing can work against you. Okay, so T cells in obese people, let's talk about that, are less capable of conducting immune surveillance and have difficulty in destroying foreign invaders. This translates to even more difficulty in avoiding and recovering from infections. So there's a tie between obesity and inability to overcome infections as well. All right, let's talk about food because, that's my big thing. So what role does food play in your immunity? Food plays an essential role in balancing the impact of fat on your immune system and vice versa. What you can eat will lower inflammation, boost immune defenses, and shrink fat tissues, leading to weight loss. All right, get out your pens and your paper. This is the information that you've been waiting for. Write it down. Blueberries. And I would say go organic as much as you possibly can and try not to eat those giant blueberries. I know everybody thinks they are amazing. They're super sweet, but anytime you eat a fruit that's going to be super sweet, it may actually have more sugar than you really want. And I will also tell you, don't make smoothies. I know this sounds counter to what everybody in the health food industry talks about, but when you take fruits and you blend them, you break down the fibers, and the fibers don't work for you the way they would if you were just chewing them naturally and spiking your own saliva and everything that needs to happen, right? So a puree, in a way, is an unnatural way of eating foods. I do know that certain people have conditions where they can't eat solid foods, and of course, in that case, you would definitely want to puree the food. There's no problem with that. But if you're a healthy individual and you're eating fruits and vegetables, you should be chewing your fruits and vegetables. Do not put them in a blender. They're not going to be as good for you because the sugar content is going to be higher, because the fiber content is broken down to a point where it's either gone in the case of juicing, or it has been broken down far more than your teeth would be able to break it down. And therefore, it's not doing what it needs to do, feeding your microbiome. So the big takeaways today are going to be: don't make smoothies, number one. And number two, don't eat super sweet fruits. So if they've been bred to be super sweet. Now, when you go to the grocery store, you're going to see marketing that's going to give you a little clue as to whether or not this fruit is going to be something that's more heirloom, which is going to have all the great natural nutrition to it, or it's been bred even naturally over time to have a higher sugar content. So be careful. Those giant blueberries are beautiful, I know, but they're too sweet. A blueberry should have some tartness to it. And the other thing is, all the good antioxidants are in the skin. And so when you have the tinier blueberries, you're going to have more surface area skin to fruit, and you want that blue skin. So go ahead, eat the tiny blueberries, eat the wild blueberries. I don't know if you ever buy the frozen wild blueberries in the grocery store, you see that they're super, super tiny. That's the blueberry that they're talking about. Also, tree nuts. Tree nuts are excellent, especially, everybody has their favorite tree nuts. I think most doctors will say that walnuts and pistachios are going to be some of the best choices you can make. I've also heard macadamia nuts. There's a big fight as to whether or not almonds are good for you, skin off, skin on, what you should do with that. I would say eating a nut is better than eating some other foods. And so don't drive yourself crazy. But there certainly are, the best choices, which again would be pistachios and walnuts. Those seem to be overall considered something really great. Now, we do have nuts that really aren't nuts, things like cashews, which I love. Some people think they're good for you, some people don't. So you have to weigh in on that. Peanuts, which is actually a legume, it's a bean, like a pea. So it's not a nut, but so you have to be able to kind of navigate a little bit. We're talking about tree nuts here. Again, stick to things like walnuts are great, certainly for your brain, pistachios. Mushrooms, excellent. Garlic and broccoli are common foods that support and activate immune cell functions, yet cause body fat to shrink. Okay. And again, this is not necessarily today a focus on weight loss. This is a focus on immune strengthening, right? So the leaner you are, the stronger your immune system might be, because you don't have this super abundance of immune cells in your fat, because you don't want that. That is a big indicator that you are on your way to autoimmune disease or some other malfunction of the immune system. All right, here we go. Some more food suggestions. Chili peppers increase the number of immune B cells that produce antibodies. Oysters also have immune boosting and anti-inflammatory properties. Tomatoes, red bell peppers, papayas, citrus fruits, guavas, and strawberries lower inflammation and reduce flares of autoimmune disease. Again, you're going to try to get the ones that aren't bred to be super, super sweet. Try to get the most heirloom of vegetables and fruits that you can. Green tea and chicken soup each have inflammation quelling benefits. Foods that are high in fiber, leafy greens, apples, pears, whole grains like whole wheat, oats, and barley feed your microbiome, which produce a short chain fatty acid that lowers inflammation. All right. So we're going to stop there and we're going to move on to body fat and chronic illness in our next episode. So today we just talked about how the immune system functions, what fat's got to do with it, what your diet has to do with it. We gave you some food recommendations, and the big no-no is no more smoothies. Cut up those fruits and vegetables and chew them to your heart's content. It's going to be so much better for you. I hope this has been helpful. We're going to wrap up today's episode with a big thank you to everyone who joined us. And I hope that this is an exciting book for you. I know I absolutely love it. And just remember that every day you're going to take a step forward, either into a longevity life or into chronic disease. So make sure that all your choices are as good as possible. And we will see you next week on Radical Age Reversal.